The house smelled like fresh paint, not because we had just painted it, but because I had been spending more and more time in the garage, working on an old wooden cabinet that Maria had once said would look stunning in the hallway. That was months ago, back when she still cared about little things like hallway furniture. Now, I could drag a neon sign that read, "Welcome to the circus," into the living room, and she wouldn't notice. I wiped my hands on an old rag and glanced at the clock, 6:47 p.m. Maria was late. Again. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was that I already knew exactly how this evening was going to play out. She'd walk in 15 minutes from now, throw her purse on the couch like she was unloading a 50-pound boulder, sigh dramatically, and say, "You would not believe the day I had." And I, being the supportive husband I am, would smile, nod, and pretend to be fascinated by whatever thrilling crisis had occurred at the marketing agency today. And yet, despite knowing this, I still found myself waiting. The way people wait for the weather to change, even when the forecast has already promised rain. At exactly 7:04 p.m., the front door opened. Right on schedule. Maria stepped in, looking exhausted, as if she had just completed a triathlon rather than sat through what I assumed was a very important meeting about the strategic placement of fonts. She dropped her purse onto the couch. Boom. 50-pound boulder. Then, like a Broadway actress playing the role of overworked professional woman, she sighed deeply and said, "You would not believe the day I had. I should have been an astrologer." "You're right. I wouldn't," I said, flipping through a magazine I wasn't reading. She walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and just stared at it. Not taking anything out. Not putting anything in. Just staring, as if the answer to all her life's problems was hidden somewhere between the milk and the leftover lasagna. Finally, she closed it and turned to me. "I might quit," she announced. "That's nice, dear," I said, still not looking up from my magazine. "I'm serious. The stress is getting to me. And the people there, ugh. Do you know what Jennifer said to me today? Something remarkably stupid, I assume?" Maria narrowed her eyes. "No. She said she's planning a surprise for me." "A surprise, Raymond? Do I look like someone who enjoys surprises?" No, she did not. Maria was the kind of person who read the last page of a book before starting it. She researched restaurants before agreeing to dinner plans. She double-checked my gas tank every time she borrowed my car, despite me telling her I always kept it at least half full. The idea of someone plotting an unscheduled event in her honor was, indeed, the sort of thing that would haunt her. "Maybe it's a good surprise," I suggested. Maria scoffed. "Please. The last time someone tried to surprise me, it was with a team-bonding escape room. I nearly called the fire department to break me out. That would have been a real surprise for everyone involved." She ignored me and grabbed a glass of water, taking a small sip before placing it back on the counter. The way her fingers lingered around the rim made me pause. Maria wasn't a lingerer. She was a grab-and-go kind of person. In and out. Done. Efficient. But tonight, she was hesitating. I knew what was coming before she even said it. "Do you want to go out this weekend?" That was new. I raised an eyebrow. "Are you asking me on a date?" Maria gave a tight smile. "I just think we should spend some time together. You know, outside of this house." "Are you suggesting that watching me build furniture while you silently judge my technique doesn't count as quality time?" "Raymond." "Maria." She exhaled through her nose, like a schoolteacher about to discipline an unruly child. "I'm serious. I already made a reservation for Saturday night. Somewhere nice. Somewhere nice." It was such an odd thing to say. Not just because Maria never made last-minute plans, but because she didn't need to sell me on dinner. We weren't one of those couples who forgot how to socialize with each other. I would have said yes. No convincing required. But something about the way she said it, "somewhere nice," felt rehearsed. Like she had practiced it. I leaned back in my chair and folded my arms. "All right. Where are we going?" She hesitated. And that's when I knew. It wasn't the hesitation itself. It was her hesitation. Maria was the kind of woman who could deliver a PowerPoint presentation on 3 hours of sleep and still have the confidence of a 5-star general. But right now, in our quiet kitchen, she was stumbling over a simple dinner plan. "Just somewhere new," she said quickly. "You'll like it. Trust me. Trust me." Those words had never felt so unnatural coming from her lips. I nodded slowly. "Sure. Sounds great." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then, just as quickly as the moment had come, it passed. She picked up her glass of water, took another sip, and walked out of the kitchen like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Maria was planning something. And not the kind of something she would put in her day planner. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to push away the thoughts that had begun creeping in. The thoughts that whispered, "She's hiding something." Maria might not like surprises, but it looked like she was about to get one. Maria had been acting suspiciously for weeks, but Saturday night was when the circus really came to town. I was already prepared for whatever performance she was about to put on. The overly casual attitude, the forced excitement, the whole "let's rekindle the magic" routine. I had seen better acting in community theater, but I was willing to play along. After all, I was curious. When someone suddenly starts treating you like their favorite person again, after months of treating you like an old lamp they keep forgetting to donate, it makes you wonder what's really going on. At exactly 7 p.m., Maria waltzed into the living room wearing a dress I had seen before. Nothing dramatic. No, look at me. I'm a brand new woman nonsense. Just a regular dress she often wore to dinner. Which was the first red flag. Because if she was trying to overcompensate, she would have pulled out something extravagant. The fact that she hadn't meant she wasn't trying to impress me. She smiled. "Ready to go?" "I've been ready for 10 minutes. She grabbed her purse, and we headed to the car. As I drove, Maria kept her hands neatly folded in her lap, staring straight ahead like a disciplined schoolgirl. Not a glance at her phone. Not a single unnecessary comment about traffic. Maria always had something to say about traffic. She once ranted for 20 minutes about a guy who didn't use his turn signal, claiming he was what's wrong with society. But now? Silent. We pulled up to the restaurant, a modern-looking place with an unreadable name that probably translated to overpriced small portions. Maria had made a reservation, so we were seated immediately. The moment we sat down, I started taking in the details. Maria kept looking over my shoulder. She was checking the entrance. I leaned back in my chair, pretending to study the menu. Maria acted like she was doing the same, but I could see the way her eyes kept flicking past me. She was waiting for someone. This was getting interesting. I decided to test something. I closed the menu and set it aside. "I'll just have whatever you're getting." Maria blinked, as if I had just declared that I was moving to the mountains to live off the land. "You don't even know what I'm ordering." "Surprise me." She hesitated. "You don't like surprises." "Neither do you." For a split second, I saw it. The panic. The calculation. The brief flicker of did he figure something out? Before she forced herself back into her carefully rehearsed role, she smiled. "All right, then. I'll order for both of us." The waiter arrived, and Maria ordered something safe. Something she knew I wouldn't complain about. That was mistake number 2. Maria loved ordering things she knew I'd find ridiculous. It was practically a game for her. When the waiter left, I leaned forward. "So, what's the occasion?" "What do you mean?" "You plan things. You don't do last-minute dates. And you certainly don't act weird about them." Maria laughed, a little too quickly. "I'm not acting weird." "Right." She picked up her water glass, took a sip, and then, there it was. The glance. Not over my shoulder this time, but to her left. Slight. Quick. But not quick enough. I turned my head casually, just in time to see a man at the bar pretending way too hard not to notice us. He had the kind of face that screamed, "I tell people I do consulting, but really I just read self-improvement books and wait for opportunities to fall into my lap." He was alone, swirling a drink in his hand, and he had been watching Maria. Well. I turned back to her. "Old coworker?" Maria frowned. "What?" "The guy at the bar. You've looked at him 3 times now. You know him." She froze for a fraction of a second before forcing a shrug. "I don't think so." Mistake number 3. If she were actually confused, she would have turned her head to check. Instead, she did everything except that. I nodded. "Must be a coincidence, then." She relaxed. Which is when I decided to push further. "So, how's Jennifer's surprise coming along?" Maria nearly choked on her water. "What? Jennifer? You said she was planning something for you at work." "Oh, right. That. Yeah, I don't know. Probably some fool office thing." This was beautiful. She was unraveling so quickly, I almost felt bad. Almost. The food arrived, and I let the conversation settle for a bit. Maria needed to think she had gotten away with whatever this was. I needed her to believe I had dropped it. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. On my way, I stopped by the bar. The guy had been watching our table the whole time. He had that guilty expression people get when they think they're good at blending in, but they're about as subtle as a car alarm at 3 a.m. I slid onto the stool next to him. "Good drink." He startled, then forced a polite smile. "Yeah, not bad." "Not bad," I repeated, nodding. "That's nice." The guy looked at me, clearly trying to figure out if I was just being friendly or if I knew something. I gave him nothing. Just a neutral expression and an easygoing demeanor. Then I hit him with it. So, how long have you been seeing my wife? The poor guy turned pale so fast, I thought he might actually pass out. His grip tightened around his glass, and he let out the kind of forced chuckle people do when their soul has just left their body. I don't know what you're talking about. I tilted my head. No? You sure? Because I gotta say, you have that look. The one guys get when they know they're about to be part of a very awkward conversation. He swallowed. Look, man. I held up a hand. Relax. I'm not going to make a scene. I just like knowing who I'm dealing with. The guy looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. We just met recently. It's not, he cut himself off, realizing that literally nothing he said was going to make this better. Not serious? I offered. He nodded weakly. Right. Well, thanks for the chat. I stood, clapped him on the shoulder, and walked back to the table. Maria had been watching from a distance, and when I sat down, she was stiff as a board. What did you just do? She asked. I took a sip of my drink. Oh, nothing much. Maria's face was frozen, her mind clearly running 100 miles per hour. She knew something had just happened, but she didn't know what. And that was exactly where I wanted her. Maria was quiet on the drive home. Not the usual tired after a long day quiet, but the kind of silence that happens when someone is debating whether or not they should fake a heart attack to get out of a conversation. She kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, hands gripping her purse like it was the only thing keeping her from jumping out of the car. So, I said, keeping my tone casual, did you enjoy dinner? She nodded a little too quickly. Yeah, it was nice. I smiled. Good. And how about the guy at the bar? Do you think he had a nice dinner? Maria blinked so fast, I thought she might sprain an eyelid. What? The guy at the bar. The one you kept glancing at like he was a faulty fire alarm you were hoping wouldn't go off. Her fingers twitched around her purse strap. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure. That makes sense. I nodded thoughtfully. Because most people stare at total strangers 36 times in one evening for no reason at all. Maria exhaled sharply. Raymond, you're making something out of nothing. That does sound like something I'd do. We pulled into the driveway, and Maria was out of the car before the engine even had a chance to settle. She went straight inside, and I followed, locking the door behind me. She tossed her purse onto the couch, crossed her arms, and finally turned to face me. All right, what exactly are you accusing me of? I tilted my head. That's an interesting question. Oh, come on. She threw up her hands. You were acting weird all night. You went up to some random guy at the bar, and now you're acting like a husband who figured out something he wasn't supposed to? Maria's face did something interesting. It was a flicker, just a half-second moment of oh no before she forced herself back into the performance. That's ridiculous. You're right. It's ridiculous. I walked past her, heading toward the hallway. It's so ridiculous that I bet you won't mind if I call that guy back and ask him a few more questions. Maria turned sharply. You got his number? I paused dramatically. Oh, so you do know who I'm talking about. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if trying to figure out which version of reality she wanted to commit to. I sat down on the armrest of the couch and crossed my arms. I'll make this easy for you, Maria. I already know he's not some stranger. I already know you've been seeing him. The only thing I don't know is how long you were planning to keep up this little show before you told me you suddenly needed to find yourself, or some other nonsense. Maria inhaled sharply. That is not what's happening. Right. Of course not. Because nothing happened, right? And this guy is just some random person who, I assume, was admiring the excellent restaurant decor the whole night. She clenched her jaw. You don't have proof. That was her mistake. I leaned forward. Maria, let me explain something. When someone says, you don't have proof, what they actually mean is, you just haven't found it yet. She exhaled sharply. You're being paranoid. You're twisting things. Of course. You. Maria, do you really want to do this? I gestured around the room. Do you really want to stand here, wasting both our time, while you dig yourself deeper into something we both know is true? She hesitated. I shrugged. Fine. If you're so confident, why don't we settle this the easy way? Maria's expression hardened. What are you talking about? I'll tell you exactly what I know, and if I'm wrong, you can walk away feeling completely justified. She hesitated. Fine. I held up a finger. 1. You made this dinner reservation in advance, but you acted like it was some spontaneous, Romantic idea. That means it wasn't about us. It was about setting up an alibi. Maria's face didn't move. I held up a second finger. 2. The guy at the bar? He wasn't drinking like someone waiting for a date. He was drinking like someone watching a situation. He wasn't there for a fun night out. He was there to see something. Maria's lips pressed into a thin line. I held up a third finger. 3. When I confronted him, he folded faster than a cheap lawn chair. He wasn't confused. He wasn't offended. He was just caught. Maria swallowed. And, I said, standing up, I already know he's not just some guy. I just don't know if he's the guy. Silence. And then, finally, I don't have to listen to this. Maria turned sharply and marched toward the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Which was fine, because I wasn't done. Not even close. Maria locked the bedroom door. A bold move, considering she wasn't exactly hiding from a burglar, just her own life choices. I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door like it was supposed to give me answers. It didn't. It just sat there, being a door. Useless. I could have knocked. I could have asked her, so, what's the plan now, Maria? Are we pretending none of this happened? But I already knew how that conversation would go. She'd say I need time to think in that dramatic voice people use when they're about to pull some grand excuse out of nowhere. And then what? We'd sit around, pretending everything was normal while she decided whether she wanted to keep playing house or run off with whatever his name was. No thanks. I walked back to the living room and grabbed my phone. If Maria wasn't ready to talk, maybe someone else was. I scrolled through my recent calls, found the unknown number I had saved under the guy from the bar, and hit dial. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. Hello. I smiled. Hey there, buddy. It's me, Raymond. You remember me, right? The husband of the woman you were gawking at like a nervous teenager? A long pause. Then, cautiously, what do you want? That's a fantastic question. Let's start with an easy one. Your name. More silence. Then, it's David. David. All right. Now we were getting somewhere. Great. See? That wasn't so hard. Now, David, here's the thing. I don't actually care about you. I care about what's been going on with my wife. And since she's currently barricaded in the bedroom like a hostage in her own marriage, I figured I'd call you instead. I don't think I should be talking to you. David, you really should. He sighed. Look, man, I didn't mean for this to be messy, Al. Oh, well, what a coincidence. I didn't mean for it to be messy either. And yet, here we are. More silence. Then a very small, very guilty, she told me you two were having problems. I almost laughed. Of course she did. Let me guess. She said I don't understand her. We've grown apart. She's just trying to find herself. Blah, blah, blah. Am I getting warm? She said things weren't working. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Right. And you, being the noble gentleman you are, figured the best way to help a struggling married woman was to, what? Offer your emotional support? Be a shoulder to cry on. It wasn't supposed to be serious. That was the moment. The confirmation. Not that I needed it, but there was something satisfying about hearing it out loud. How long? I asked. David hesitated. How long? A sigh. Then, finally, a few months. A few months. I leaned back against the couch, letting that sink in. Maria had been living in my house, eating dinner with me, asking about my day, while sneaking around with this guy for months. And for what? For David? A man who fell apart the second I asked him a question? That was the best she could do? Raymond, listen. David, no offense, but I really don't care what you have to say. I rubbed my temple. You already did me a favor tonight. You just didn't realize it. What does that mean? I smiled. You'll find out. And then I hung up. The house was silent again. I glanced toward the hallway. Maria was still in the bedroom, probably pacing, probably rehearsing whatever excuse she was about to give me. I took my time walking to the door. Then I knocked. Maria's voice came through, annoyed. What? We're talking. I don't feel like talking right now. Well, that's a shame, I said, leaning against the frame, because I just got off the phone with David. The silence on the other side of the door was so loud, I almost laughed. Then, slowly, the lock clicked open. Maria stood in the doorway, arms crossed, jaw tight. She wasn't panicking yet, but I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was deciding how to play this. If she should go for denial, anger, or the classic how dare you invade my privacy approach. I had to give her credit. Most people would already be stuttering excuses, but Maria? She was trying to strategize. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. Not to be dramatic, but because I wanted her to know there was nowhere to run. Go ahead, I said, gesturing. Let's hear it. Maria's fingers tapped against her arm. What exactly did he say? Don't do that. I shook my head. Don't play the maybe I can figure out how much he knows game. We're past that. She exhaled sharply. Fine. What do you want me to say? I raised an eyebrow. You really don't know? Maria shifted her weight. Look, Raymond, nope. I cut her off, pointing at her like she was a contestant on a game show. Try again. You started that sentence like it was going to be a heartfelt confession, but I already know it's just a setup for an excuse. Her nostrils flared. This is ridiculous. What's ridiculous is that you were sneaking around with David of all people. I mean, come on, Maria. David? She stiffened. You don't even know him. Neither do you, apparently. I folded my arms. Because if you did, you'd know he folds under pressure faster than a cheap umbrella in a hurricane. Maria looked away, jaw clenched. And let's not forget your incredible performance at dinner tonight, I continued. Truly remarkable. The forced enthusiasm, the awkward glances, the no, I totally don't know that guy at the bar routine. Oscar-worthy. She turned back to me, eyes sharp. All right, fine. You want honesty? Yes, I've been seeing David. Yes, it's been a few months. But it's not what you think. I blinked. Oh, this should be good. Maria threw up her hands. I was confused, all right? Things between us haven't been great. You've been distant, I've been stressed, and... Oh, come on. I let out a laugh. That's the excuse? Maria, you didn't cheat because I was distant. You cheated because you wanted to. If you were actually unhappy, you would have said something. Instead, you just... What? Had a midlife crisis and picked up a David along the way. Her face twisted with frustration. You're acting like I planned this. No, you're acting like you didn't plan it. I gestured toward her. Like you just accidentally fell into his arms one day. Oops. How did that happen? Must have tripped on a bad decision. Maria's hands curled into fists at her sides. So what now, Raymond? Are you just going to stand there making jokes? Jokes are the only thing keeping me from throwing your stuff on the lawn. Her mouth opened, then closed. She was running out of angles. I sighed. Look, Maria, you don't have to keep performing. We're past the point of fixing anything. The only thing left to do is admit what happened and move forward. Maria stared at me, and for the first time tonight, I saw it. The realization that this wasn't just some argument she could win. This wasn't going to end with me backing down, pretending everything was fine, and letting her rewrite history. So that's it? She asked quietly. Yeah, I said. That's it. Silence. Then, without another word, Maria walked past me, grabbed a bag from the closet, and started packing. Maria packed like she was defusing a bomb, careful, deliberate, avoiding sudden movements, like I might change my mind and lock her in the house if she moved too fast. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching with the kind of detached curiosity you have when you see a car trying to parallel park for the 5th time. It was both pathetic and slightly impressive. You don't have to rush, I said, mostly just to see how she'd react. Her hands paused for a second over a pair of folded jeans before she continued. I don't want to drag this out. I smirked. Right. Because you've been all about efficiency up until now. Maria ignored that one, which was a shame, because I was on a roll. She zipped up the bag and finally turned to face me, arms crossed. So that's it. I tilted my head. You sound disappointed. I just thought. She stopped, sighing. I don't know. I stood up. Let me help you. I grabbed the bag and walked it to the front door before she could protest. When I turned back, she was standing in the hallway, shifting her weight from foot to foot like a guilty teenager caught sneaking in past curfew. I don't know where I'm going yet, she admitted. I shrugged. Not my problem. She flinched like I had just thrown a bucket of cold water at her. And that's when I realized she had expected something else. A fight, maybe. Some grand emotional meltdown where I begged her to stay, to fix things, to convince me that the last few months hadn't been a complete joke. She wasn't ready for this version of me. Is that really how you feel? She asked, voice quieter now. Maria, you cheated. Lied. Planned a whole dinner just to throw me off. And David? Really? I shook my head. You didn't care how this would end. You just cared about not getting caught. She swallowed. It wasn't. Don't finish that sentence. I waved a hand. Seriously, whatever excuse you were about to make, just save it. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Maria grabbed her bag, opened the door, and stepped outside. She hesitated, turning back like she had one last thing to say. Maybe she thought she owed me some kind of explanation, a final justification to make herself feel better. But I was already closing the door. The first thing I did was sit down. Not because I was sad, not because I needed to process, but because that had been a long day, and I deserved to sit in my own house without any ridiculous performances playing out in front of me. Then I took out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts, found David's number, and sent him a single text. "She's all yours." Blocked him immediately after, of course. Not because I was angry, but because I had already wasted enough time on that guy. Then, finally, I leaned back against the couch, let out a deep breath, and stared at the ceiling. It was over. Not just the marriage. The waiting. The wondering when she'd finally tell me. The pretending not to notice. The ridiculous dinner. The fake smiles. The useless conversations. It was all done. And, honestly, I felt fine. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel